Welcome to chapter 1 of our self-directed behavior book. So this book is the book that we use for our self-change project. You can kind of think of it like a workbook that has some information and content that you'll be tested on and need to know to properly execute this process. But it's a little bit different than our critical thinking book or our Beyond Feelings book in that it really is designed to help us do a series of exercises to get to know ourselves better so that we can successfully change whatever the behavior it is that we're looking to change. Or maybe we're not looking to change a behavior, maybe we're looking to start doing something that we've always wanted to do, running, painting, playing the piano. And this process can help us to figure out why we haven't started that and then to start it. So, we go through this lecture, and there are several times where you'll be asked to do lecture activities, like always. And some of them are ambiguous in nature because we're all doing different projects. So you kind of have to customize the activities towards your own project. And also, not all of the activities that I ask you to do are necessarily going to make sense for your project or be a tactic or technique that you will ultimately use in your official project. However, as we go through these activities, I'd like for you to kind of try them all on. So do all of them to the best of your ability. And if it doesn't make sense or they don't really work, that's okay. I just want you to try. And sometimes when people think a certain exercise won't work for their project, they're surprised to find out that it does. But that's not always the case. So anyways, just try all of the activities or exercises that I ask you to try. And also just be aware that some of the activities will seem redundant, and they are designed intentionally to be redundant. The idea is that if we kind of keep going back and looking at something over and over again, and we try to look at it differently each time, maybe we'll come up with different answers. So it's okay to be a little bit redundant. Just try to dig deeper each time you do an exercise that you feel like maybe you've done before or is similar to one you've done before. Okay, so the first concept that we're going to talk about is kind of the broad concept that we're going to be doing all semester long, which is self-regulation. So let's break down that term. The idea basically is that we regulate our behavior constantly. If we're speaking too quietly and we realize that others can't hear us, for example, then we speak up. That's regulating our behavior. If we are telling a story and our audience looks bored, they're yawning, they're looking away, they're checking their phone, we change our topics or the course of the story. If you are working out and you feel like you're going to pass out, you slow that treadmill down, right? So we're constantly regulating our behavior. So to regulate something, the definition of that is to control something or direct it by a principle. For example, the speed limit might be 45 miles per hour. And we direct our behavior in accordance with that principle, the speed limit, so that we don't get a ticket or we don't get in a car accident. So we regulate our behavior in accordance with principles. We put things in good order. We make adjustments. And then the next concept is self-regulation, which is really what we're talking about here. So building on that term regulate, let's talk about self-regulation. And this implies the ability to control ourselves, to exert control over our acts and our inner processes. In other words, to control both our internal activities, at least our mental activities, our feelings, our impulses, our thoughts, our behaviors, and then, of course, behaviors are actions or external reactions. So the ability to control our behaviors as well. So in the short term, self-regulation might be something like slowing down while we're working out. But the long-term self-regulation might be maintaining a healthy diet or exercising to prepare to run for a marathon and then actually running that marathon. So self-regulation allows us to guide behavior towards desired outcomes, which is really what we're trying to accomplish in this project. But that takes some self-control, right? So let's discuss the concept of self-control. Self-control, defined, is the ability to successfully self-regulate to a variety of situations, and that's really the key. People sometimes speak about self-control as if it's a general ability, like you either have it or you don't. But really, it's more situational. It's not general, but it's specific to certain instances or circumstances. Do I have self-control when it comes to donuts? Do I have self-control when it comes to getting my homework done on time? So the answers to these questions might be very different, or they might be the same, but nonetheless, they're specific to those instances. So what we know is that people with high self-control get better grades, they're less depressed and anxious, they have higher self-esteem, they have more satisfying intimate relationships, and research even shows that they're more popular. So the idea of self-control doesn't mean never letting go of control. It means knowing when it's appropriate to let go and when it's not, and having the ability to regain control at your own will. For example, if you're on a diet and you go 2-3 weeks without having a dessert and you're really exercising self-control in that way, and then you're at a birthday party and you decide to have dessert, that is still self-control, right? You're choosing when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate to have control over that impulse to eat dessert. So when I mentioned all of those kind of qualities of people that have self-control, or those positive outcomes of people that have high self-control, like the better grades and the self-esteem and the more satisfying intimate relationships and all that stuff. One of the ways that we discovered those outcomes is by doing this very famous and really cute research called the Marshmallow Test. And what they would do is they would give kids a marshmallow, and the researcher would tell that kid, listen, you can eat the marshmallow now, but if you don't, and you just hang out here for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It depended on the kid's age, how long they had to wait. But if you don't, and you control yourself, then when I come back, if you haven't eaten the marshmallow, I'll give you a second one, and then you can eat both. And so the kids that ate the marshmallow and couldn't wait were studied for the length of their life, as were the kids that waited and then got 2 marshmallows. And that's one of the ways that we were able to identify all of these outcomes. So the kids that didn't eat the marshmallows tended to be the kids that got better grades and were more popular and had higher self-esteem, indicating that, if you're able to control your impulses, if you're able to practice self-control, then you're more likely to get these positive outcomes. So let's watch the marshmallow test.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have 2. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. I'm gonna go do something and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. It smells really good.
All right, so it's up to you. You can have it now or you can wait. Okay? I'll be back. Stay in the chair, okay? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna leave and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did?
Yeah.
You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So did I tell you to give you another one? Okay, now you can have both. You need them.
So is this ability to control our impulses and have self-control and the ability to self-regulate, is it something we're born with? Is it a personality trait? Is it in our genes? And the answer is like yes and no. Yes, we are kind of predispositioned to be able to be more reflective than impulsive. We do either possess or don't possess an impulsivity gene. However, self-control and self-regulation are still skills that we can learn. Regardless of kind of what we come into the world with or our baseline, we can still develop the skills of self-regulation. When we finally have the ability to change ourselves, which is tough, I've read that if you think you can change someone else, like someone you're in a relationship with or something, think about how tough it is just to change yourself. And that's so true. It's very difficult to change our habits and our behaviors, whether it be ways in which we think or actions that we do. But when we do have the ability to change ourselves, then we can say that we have the skills that make up successful regulation. So let's break that down. What's a skill? A skill is the ability to do something well, which we develop through knowledge and practice. We may learn some skills easier than others, but we know that all skills must be learned. The opportunity to develop a skill must also be present. We can't learn to fly to the moon if we don't have access to a spaceship, for example. And we do not learn one general, all-encompassing skill, but skills are related to specific tasks. So just because you're skilled at studying doesn't mean you're skilled at controlling negative thoughts, for example. And being skilled means even if the specific task varies or changes in some way, your ability does not. So if you're skilled at studying, then the subject, whether it's psychology or history, won't change your ability. You would just make adjustments. So in self-regulation, we must think about the behaviors that we need to perform and the situations in which we will perform those behaviors. So to get good at self-regulation, we must practice in different conditions to make sure our newly learned behavior holds up. What should you do to change yourself when you want to? One thing you can do is just ask yourself, what keeps me from reaching my goal? And the way you think about the problem will have a strong impact on what you do about it. So what keeps you from reaching your goal can be termed impediments to your goals, obstacles, things that are preventing you from reaching your goal. And so there's a couple different options to answer that question, a couple different mindsets that you can come at that problem with. So the first alternative is that you can argue that what's keeping you from reaching your goal is some cause of behavior that are found in the environment. Events and forces outside of a person causes their behavior. And so maybe you would say that, you have bad luck, or it's in the stars, or it's fate, or other people, or the situation itself is responsible for you not reaching your goals. For example, I didn't do well on the exam because the test was too hard, or it's too early in the morning, or my boyfriend was mean to me right before. Another alternative explanation for what keeps a person from reaching their goal could be that the causes of the behavior are found in the person. Maybe they're not reaching their goals because they have a lack of willpower or some detrimental personality trait or symptoms of some type of inner disorder. For example, I didn't do well on the exam because I didn't study, I didn't try hard enough, I was lazy, I'm not smart enough, I can't pay attention. And so the thing is that blaming everything on the environment, like we had in the first alternative, really gives up control, right? You're saying, I can't do anything about this. It's not my fault that things aren't going my way. I can't control luck. I can't control if my boyfriend's mean to me. I can't control if the test is too hard. And when we give up all control, we can't really change. And the problem with saying that all of the fault lies in ourselves, like we have here in alternative 2, is that it can be like very negative and very depressing. And so the truth is that usually the reason that we are having impediments to our goals or we're not reaching our goals is really a combination of the first and second reasons that we talked about here. It's a combination between the person and the situation. So a person's behavior changes somewhat from one situation to another, depending on a person's skills appropriate to those different situations. And so this is the viewpoint that we will use. Maybe you didn't do well on the exam because it's early and because you didn't study, right? Maybe both of those things are true. So when we're looking at why haven't I been able to reach my goal, we want to look at it in like a well-rounded way. What are things in the environment that are preventing me from reaching my goals? And what are things within myself that are preventing me from reaching my goals? And so I think it's worth noting that there was this research that kind of shows that, the way we perceive situations or the way we look at different circumstances in the world really is based on kind of how we're feeling and our mood. So, for example, there was this study where they asked people in a happy relationship, that kind of first 6 months when your brain is behaving like in the same way as a person who's addicted to cocaine. That's a true statement. There's actually a lot of research on that. But you're kind of making mixtapes and thinking about the person obsessively, and you're just in that honeymoon phase where it's like you're addicted to this other person, right? So when we found people that were in that stage of a new relationship, a happy relationship, and we asked them to imagine their significant other doing a positive behavior, and then we said why would your significant other do a positive behavior, their responses were things like, well, because they're sweet, they're nice, they're loving, they're thoughtful, of course they're going to do a positive behavior, such as bring me flowers or get my car washed for me. So that explanation for their behavior is being attributed to what we call dispositional factors, things within that person, their IQ, their characteristics, their personality traits, their genes, their disposition. And then when we ask someone in a happy relationship why their partner would do a negative behavior, like imagine your partner comes home from work and they're really grumpy. Why are they grumpy? Why are they doing this negative behavior? The response would always be due to some situational factor, like, oh, well, their boss was really mean to them today, or they got stuck in a ton of traffic, or they have a horrible migraine. Poor baby, it's really not their fault. But what's interesting is that when we then asked people in unhappy relationships those same questions, what they attributed the behaviors to is the complete opposite. So when we took someone that, had been in this relationship for 5 years and they felt like their significant other was nagging and annoying and they just couldn't wait to break up and they already had one foot out the door, and then we asked them, like, okay, imagine this person who you really can't stand anymore brings you flowers. Why did they do this positive behavior? And people would say, oh, there's something in the situation that required them to do it. Like they must have cheated on me. And then when we said, imagine this person that you're in this unhappy relationship with does a negative behavior, like they come home grumpy. Why do you think they would come home grumpy? The participants in the research would say, because they're a jerk. They're always grumpy. They're always in a bad mood. That's who they are as a person. That's why I'm breaking up with them. So the point is that we tend to look at situations and kind of analyze the outcomes or explain or evaluate those circumstances based on really our perspective, what kind of mood we're in, where we're coming from. And so when we're looking at our own behaviors and we're trying to identify like what's preventing me from reaching my goals, we need to consider that, our analysis of this, our evaluation of this is going to be somewhat biased and subjective based on things as simple as like am I in a happy mood or in an unhappy mood today? So we want to try to be as objective as possible when figuring out why am I not reaching these goals that I set for myself. So some students, when they think like, why am I not reaching this goal that I'd set for myself? I always wanted to stop procrastinating, but I'm always turning in my homework late. Why can't I just get that time management under control? And one of the reasons that people say that they can't, control certain behaviors is because of willpower. People say, I just don't have the willpower to do my homework, or I don't have the willpower to deny myself that cupcake. So people often refer to their willpower when talking about these self-change projects or these adjustment problems. I want to start working out, but I just don't have any willpower. This implies that there is something in your psychological makeup that pushes you to do things unless you don't have that part in your psychological makeup. So you don't have anything pushing you to kind of reach your goals. So the idea of willpower actually has some problems. If willpower is a part of our psychological makeup, if it's a part of who we are, then why do we have it in some situations but not in others? For example, if you say like I just don't have the willpower to pay attention in class, but when the Chargers are playing, your willpower to pay attention is so strong that you notice every missed tackle, every incorrect route, every bad call. So think of your strengths and weaknesses in terms of situations rather than this like overarching willpower that's part of your psychological makeup. So we also can't blame our personalities for our bad behaviors either. Studies show that we demonstrate different personality characteristics in different situations, which is like a very smart thing to do. When you're at church, you don't want to act like you're in the club. And when you're at school, you don't want to act like you're out to dinner with your friends, right? So we adjust our behavior based on the situation that we are in. And we need to keep that in mind when we're looking at our behavior. We need to keep in mind that the situation is really powerful and that it will dictate different actions and reactions within the behavior that we're investigating and observing. So when we're doing this self-change project, I have some students that say like, I'm going to stop drinking, for example, and my plan for doing that is I'm just going to go to the bar and stand in the face of temptation and just not drink, and really put myself to the test. The problem with that is that most of us aren't successful at standing in the face of temptation, unless maybe like you're Gandhi, who used to sleep in the same bed with attractive young followers because he had taken an oath of celibacy and he wanted to show that he could avoid the temptation to have sex with them. But most of us aren't Gandhi, and we can't do that. We're kind of setting ourselves up to fail. Or maybe the one day we go to the bar, we can avoid a drink, but the next day we're not going to be able to maintain that level of temptation avoidance. So the thing is that most of us choose short-term pleasure over long-term goals. We'd rather watch TV now than study for the exam. We'd rather eat the ice cream now than lose the weight over time. So to avoid tempting situations, we have to use foresight and planning. And that's something that this project will help us to do, is come up with a plan. When I'm in a tempting situation, what am I going to do? How am I going to not engage in my bad behavior? All right, so the technique that we're going to be using in order to do our self-change project is a technique that psychologists use in real life in addiction clinics, rehab clinics, in sex offender units at places like Patton State Mental Hospital, and then just regular therapists are the ones who use behavior modification the most. So clients will come to these therapists and say like, I need help controlling my anger, or getting rid of this phobia, or whatever it may be that they want to change or start doing. And they will use this process or this technique called behavior modification to do that. And it's a systematic process. So it is a step-by-step thing that has been researched and found to be valid and reliable, and that it is successful. It works. So there are times when one skill is not going to be up to the task at hand, right? Like growing up, I lived in the Midwest, and so when I was growing up in the Midwest, there wasn't a lot to do So I danced. I started dancing when I was 2. I did ballet, tap, jazz, hip hop, and I was at the dance studio every day. And I was, this is like a humble brag, but in Minnesota I was pretty good. I was always the best dancer in the dance studio. And then I moved to LA and I started going to auditions and things like that out here. And I remember one time I was at this audition to dance on like there was this kid that was on this old show called Family Matters, and he was going to become a pop star, and he needed backup dancers for his tour. And I was there auditioning, and there was this girl that was like 8 years old, and I was probably 19 at the time, and she just danced circles around me. I mean, she was amazing. And my skills, which were like amazing in Minnesota, were really not up to the task at hand when I got to LA and had some real competition. So, sometimes our skills aren't as good as we thought they were. Sometimes our self-control skills fail us. And in these situations, we have to be more conscious of our self-regulation. And so we're going to use this process called behavior modification to help us to gain control and to develop our skills. So self-modification or behavior modification is a planned continuing effort to change behavior to cope with a task that we cannot currently master. And we can learn different skills to help us deal with these challenging tasks. When we are in a stressful situation, the amount of stress isn't really what matters. It's how we cope with the stress, and we need skills to help us cope. So when we looked at those kids that did the marshmallow test, and we asked them, hey, you didn't eat that one marshmallow. You waited and you got that second marshmallow. How did you do that? What we found is that they had this skill called cool thoughts. And when they were looking at the marshmallow, they were intentionally trying to make it less tempting by thinking things like, oh, it looks like a giant marshmallow cloud. I bet I could lay on that cloud and float around. And where would I float off to? Oh, I'd float off to Narnia. And that'd be such a fun time. What would I do while I was there? Whereas kids that did eat the marshmallow, when they were trying to resist it, they were lacking the skills to help them have self-control in that situation. And they were engaging in what researchers called hot thoughts. They were looking at that marshmallow going, oh, it looks so delicious. Oh, I bet it's so squishy in my mouth. Oh, it's probably so sweet. Oh, I really want to eat it. And then they ate it. So even things like the kind of thoughts that we use to approach our bad behavior can really help us to stop doing the bad behavior, or unfortunately cause us to continue doing the bad behavior. So behavior modification is what we're going to use to help us develop the skills we need to change. And there are 6 steps kind of to define behavior modification, or that explain the overarching process. Our book breaks it down into 10 steps because it's a little bit more specified to our needs. But at any rate, they're covering the same exact thing. So the first thing that we need to do is identify a goal. So what thing do you want to change? And the second thing is we need to record observations of ourselves doing our bad behavior. So it sounds funny, but I always tell my students, like, we're not ready to start changing yet. So don't start changing yet. Keep doing your bad behavior. Unless it's something, really bad, like murdering people or black tar heroin, then you should stop. But if it's, biting your nails or procrastinating or something that's not going to end in, harm to someone else or yourself, then I need you to keep doing your bad behavior, because we need to record baseline data. We need to figure out what's going on here. What's causing you to do your bad behavior? How do you feel after you do your bad behavior? What's going on while you're doing your bad behavior? So we're going to record observations of our bad behavior. We're not actually going to start trying to change until we get to chapter 8 in the book. And so then the next step, step 3, is to design a plan. And that's essentially what we'll be doing for the first 7 chapters of the book. And I will guide you through all of the systematic processes for designing an effective plan for change. Step 4 is to execute that plan. And that will involve a variety of techniques as well, reward systems, relaxation techniques, a bunch of different things. And then we will record observations of our good behavior. And step 6, we'll evaluate. Did this plan work? And if not, then we'll have to make adjustments and try again. And so it's very common that people have to make adjustments and try again. It's very rare that we nail it the first time because it's a difficult and complex thing that we're doing here. A lot of these behaviors we've held for our whole lives, so we really have to figure out what works and what doesn't work when we do that evaluation step and then put it into practice. And that is the plan. That's the behavior modification technique, and that's what we're going to be doing over the course of the semester using this self-directed behavior book and these lectures as our guide. The purpose of the self-change project. Why don't you just tell me your problem? I'm a psychologist. I've been doing this a while, and then I just tell you what to do, right? Well, the goal is to teach you ways to improve your skills in situations where tasks are difficult for you. So we're going to learn new actions, coping skills, problem-solving skills, and gain some knowledge. And just telling you how to fix your problem isn't really going to help you. One of the reasons is that you may not be fully aware of all the things contributing to your problem. You may eat because of stress, and you need to learn stress reduction techniques. And you just thought that you just overate. You didn't even realize that it was because you were stressed, right? So this project will help you to kind of get to the heart of the issue or the root of the problem, which it's common for people to start out this project with the project being one goal, and then as they start to kind of do some self-investigation, they realize that what they thought was the root of their problem is actually not the root of their problem, and they have to readjust, they have to change their goal, and that's fine and totally appropriate if you need to do that. And then also you need to learn how to do the self-change skill or the self-modification skill so that you can apply these skills that you're learning in any situation. So it's like I'm giving you, or the book's giving you, or this process is giving you skills to put into a toolbox. So next time you want to change something, you know exactly how to do it. You have the tools to do so. And then the third purpose of the self-change project is to find your power, to teach you that success depends on you and that you're capable of doing something as hard as changing a bad behavior that you've possessed for a long time or breaking a habit. And so it's really about self-confidence. It's really learning that you can be kind of whatever person you want to be, and you have the power and you have the control to live your best life and be as happy as you want to be. And doing the self-change project and learning those skills will get you one step closer to being able to do that. We're going to need to learn some terms that we refer to over and over again throughout this project. And those terms are antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. So behaviors, I think we all kind of know what those mean. Those are observable actions, things we do that we can see, that other people can see. But for the purposes of our class, when we're talking about your quote-unquote bad behavior or undesirable behavior, we're not only talking about observable actions, but we're talking about inner mental processes as well. So thoughts, feelings, actions can all be considered behaviors for our purposes in this class. And then the other terms that you need to know are antecedents and consequences, and that's really what we're going to focus on now. But to introduce us to those ideas, we have a video on this ABC method here. So let's take a look at what antecedents and consequences are.
Hi, my name is Woody Scholl. Today, we're going to talk about the ABC model of cognitive behavioral therapy. The ABC model helps us to explain why we think the things that we think, why we feel the things that we feel, and why we do the things that we do. It's valuable to understand the ABC model because once we understand how our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors interact, we gain the power to start changing them. The ABC model looks like this. First, there's an activating event. An activating event is anything that actually happens to a person. It's just any situation that you encounter. Let's go with the example of running into a friend at the grocery store. You see them in the produce section, you say hi, they say hi right back, and then they return to searching for the perfect banana. That's the activating event. It's the fact of what actually happens. Next, we have beliefs about the activating event. Beliefs are what we think about the situation. Two people might have different beliefs about the exact same activating events. What are some different ways that we can think about the situation at the grocery store? One person might think, I must have done something to upset my friend, they're totally ignoring me. Another person might think, my friend is really involved in finding that perfect banana, that's their business, I'm just gonna move along. The truth is, both of these ways of thinking are possible. We don't actually have evidence either way. Our beliefs usually happen so quickly that we aren't even aware of them. We don't take a second to stop and think, was there evidence for that? This is where things get interesting. Someone who's depressed is more likely to have a negative thought about any situation. Someone who is not depressed is more likely to see the same situation as either neutral or positive. Finally, we have a consequence. The consequence is the result of our belief about the situation. This can include how we feel or what we do because of our beliefs. For example, the individual who felt that their friend ignored them, they might go home feeling hurt, and they might not talk to that friend for a while thinking that they were upset with them. On the other hand, the individual who thought that their friend was just acting funny for no good reason, they'll probably forget about it, go home feeling just fine, and they might call up their friend that evening to check and make sure everything's okay. The consequence stage of the ABC model has an important effect on our lives. The individual who felt ignored by their friend will probably end up having a worse relationship with them, which will further reinforce the idea that they've done something wrong. Now imagine this same pattern applied to almost every relationship and every situation that this person encounters. So that's how the ABC model works, but how can we use it to our advantage? It's not easy, but with practice, we can learn to intervene at either the A, the B, or the C to better control our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. We can intervene in the activating event by avoiding situations that we know usually turn out badly for us. For example, if there's someone that you spend time with and whenever you do, there's some horrible outcome, you might recognize that you should probably spend less time with them. Sometimes that just isn't realistic. In these situations, we can try to change our belief. Going back to the example at the grocery store, the individual who felt that their friend ignored them, they could stop and think, is there really evidence that my friend doesn't like me? Or am I just assuming that? Finally, we can intervene at the consequence. We can do this by learning skills such as deep breathing or meditation to help us manage our emotions, maybe reducing depression or anxiety. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, share it and subscribe to our channel down below to see more videos like it. If you're looking for more tools related to mental health, visit our website, therapistday.com.
To recap the video, let's start by talking about what antecedents are. So antecedents can be considered triggers. What happens before we engage in our bad behavior? It's a cue to stimulate you to act in certain ways. And antecedents or triggers can be physical events, thoughts, emotions, inner speech. And so when you're thinking about what are my antecedents, what triggers me to do this bad behavior? You know, when I have road rage and I'm on the 10 freeway and I'm throwing pennies at other cars because I'm so enraged, you know, what came before that? What were the antecedents before that? And you need to think about the things that you were saying to yourself. What was going on in the environment? Was it a super hot day? Were you listening to Metallica? Had you just gotten in a fight with your significant other? And for antecedents, you know, it might be things that happened moments before your bad behavior, days before, weeks before, or perhaps it goes all the way back to your childhood and some behaviors that you learned from, I don't know, say your parents. Maybe when you were growing up, your mom or dad would be on the 10 freeway and they'd be throwing pennies at people. So we need to consider these antecedents, these triggers. What's happening or what has happened before we do our bad behavior. We also need to consider our consequences, and consequences are defined as events that come after a behavior. And consequences affect whether or not we're going to repeat certain actions. So when we think about consequences, what we need to remember is that they affect how we feel. And so when I use the word consequence here, it has like a negative connotation, right? Like consequences are always bad things. But actually it's a little different when we're talking about consequences in this context. So The idea is that we wouldn't do our bad behavior if there wasn't something rewarding about it. There's something that feels good about our bad behavior, or we wouldn't be doing it. So when we're talking about consequences, I'm not necessarily talking about like the healthy consequences of doing your bad behavior, because that probably doesn't really exist. I'm talking about what feels good about doing your bad behavior, even if that, what feels good is destructive or harmful. For example, what feels good about doing crack cocaine? I've never done it, of course, but I'm sure that it makes people feel high, right? What feels good about being drunk? You get drunk, you feel high. And so that altered state of consciousness is the consequence. It's what feels good about doing your bad behavior. When you throw pennies at someone on the 10 freeway, what feels good about that? A release, right? Like a catharsis. Okay, so when we're talking about our bad behavior, we have to look at what feels good about doing my bad behavior. Because otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. There has to be something rewarding. There has to be something that feels good about doing the bad behavior. I've used the word habits a lot in the lecture today, so let's just take a moment to identify a habit. A habit is an automatic response to a situation. For example, once we learn to drive, then we can really drive without much thinking. So our habits can be automatic, and we need to remove our automatic responses or our automatic habits to certain situations if we're going to change. And self-modification requires us to learn what our bad habits are and replace them with good habits. So to learn what our habits are, to identify those habits, we need to think of ourselves in terms of different contexts or in terms of different situations. So as an exercise, just to start thinking of ourselves and our behaviors and our thoughts and our feelings in general, not necessarily our self-change project goals, but just ourselves in general, and how we think differently and act differently, and our habits are different in different situations. We're going to do our first lecture activity of the day. So go ahead and label this lecture activity number 1. And what I want you to do is list 5 of your personality traits and then put them in context. So you can fill out this template 5 times. I am blank when blank. And for the first blank, I want you to just fill in a personality trait. And for the second blank, I want you to think of when you express that personality trait. What situation do you express that personality trait in? What feeling are you having when you express that personality trait? Maybe even who you're around. So what is the context in which we see that particular personality trait? For example, I might write, I am outgoing when I'm at school, or I am irritable when I don't get enough sleep, or I am generous when I have extra money, or I am angry when I'm in traffic. So start thinking about just any personality trait, any behavior in context. I am blank when blank. So do 5 of those just as an exercise to start considering that our behaviors and our personality traits are malleable and they're flexible depending on the context. All right, so our self-change project requires the use of this behavior modification, or as we're calling it, self-modification technique. So does it really work? Does self-modification really work? Well, even problems that we would consider seriously challenging can be changed. In fact, 29 million people quit smoking when reports came out showing that it caused cancer between 1965 and 1975. 95% of people who quit smoking do it without any professional help, and 75% of people with alcohol problems learn to control their drinking without any professional help. Vietnam vets with heroin addictions, many of them were able to stop all by themselves. So studies show that these self-modification techniques are very effective. Self-modification techniques are effective in treating a variety of different psychological problems. You can see on the slide there's a list of self-change projects that students have worked on and had success in changing. But of course, that list is not exhaustive. There's many, many more. So there's lots of published cases of success for ideas on what your goal might be. So if you want to look in the book, you can see which goals have had success and see if any that you were thinking of are on that list. But even if they're not on that list, there's this technique is that we're going to use is effective if it's used correctly, and if you really allow yourself to go through the process and do the exercise, and you believe that it can work and you get into it, then, even if your goal is not necessarily on a list of published cases that have had success, it certainly doesn't mean that there aren't any cases like that or that you won't be a case that works. So check that out. But in short, yes, self-modification does really work. I've been doing this project with students for years, and those that really put the effort in, many of them have what they've described as very transformative experiences. So be excited about the project, get into it. The more into it you are, the more rewarding it will be. So that's it for this lecture on Chapter 1 from your Self-Directed Behavior book. You can head on over to Canvas and complete the assignments for this week or this module, and we shall see you next time.